All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we're talking the NC State Wolfpack, Notre Dame's sixth opponent of the 2025 season. And NC State's had an interesting season. Big picture, it's not too bad. They're 4-2 on the season, but they are 1-2 in their last three games, with their only win coming over the Campbell Camels, where they put on an offensive explosion.
Oh, yeah.
But you performed the way that you should have in that game, man. And this has been an interesting season, and nothing that I would expect anything less from Dave Dorn. We talked about him at the start of the season. It's just one of those years where he's just one of the most interesting coaches to evaluate. He's been the head coach at NC State since 2013. He's led them to 8 or 9 bowl seasons, but then he's also never had a 10-win season. Yeah, so it's just all of these ingredients are just so interesting when you talk about NC State.
Yeah, and look, their 4-2 starts not necessarily bad. It's the way that they lost to. It's losing to Virginia Tech on the road, who had just fired their coach. It was just, you see the same mistakes over and over again. Messed up plays on special teams, turnovers, just not being prepared to handle an environment or a moment. Like, those are the things that have really kept Dave Dorn from taking this program over the next step. Because like you said, he's done a lot of good things. And he's taken them to your point, 10 bowl games, but it's in 10 of the last 11 seasons, with 2019 being the only exception. Bounce in 2020, they go 8-4, and so they went 9-4 in 17 and 18. Obviously, Notre Dame played the 17 team. They go 4-8 in 2019, and the next year they bounce back. They get better. They win 8 games, and they won 9 in 2021. They won 8 in 2022. They won 9 in 2023. And then last year, they go 6-7 and just had some really bad losses. And last year's team, you're going into the season thinking, like, this team has a chance to be pretty good, when you looked at what the players had coming back, and they just could never live up to expectations. And then this year's team, you look at and say, there's a lot of talent, but I just don't know what to make of this team. And that's just kind of been Dave Dorn's his thing. And you talk about all the bowl games that he's been in, but they've also lost their last 5 bowl games. Well, 5 of the bowl games they've played, because they didn't play the Holiday Bowl in 2021 because of COVID stuff. But it's just been, you watch them every year and you're like, boy, there's athletes on this team. How are they not better? But at the same time, because he has talented teams, they're prone to pull off some upsets. And that's the thing that you have to avoid, Trev, is you have to avoid that bad loss. 2017, they lose their opener to South Carolina. 3 weeks later, they go on the road and beat a ranked Florida State team. 2 weeks after that, they blow out a ranked Louisville team. I mean, they're that team that is always dangerous. And they could look bad week after week after week, and then the next week just go out and just kind of figure it out and look like gangbusters. And that's what makes this team kind of frustrating, to be completely honest with you, Trev, is they should just be a better football team. They should be a better football team, and they're not. And that that has to be maddening. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's any NC State fans in the chat, but I'd be frustrated with that. I mean, 2021, they beat a top 10 Clemson team, a number 9 Clemson team in overtime. And then, just lose to a mediocre Miami team a few weeks later than that. It's just they're a frustrating team to watch if you're a fan, but at the same time, that also makes them a dangerous team, in my opinion. And that's what makes you a little bit nervous about a game like this.
Yeah, big picture, they're hot and cold.
Yeah.
Dave Dorn, his entire career, has been hot and cold. And we talk about it all the time and on this show that, teams emulate their head coach. And I think that NC State is kind of the perfect emulation of Dave Dorn. A lot of potential. All signs point like you should have more success. You're in a good spot for recruiting. You have notable alum. You're in one of the Power 4 conferences. And it's just one of those things that they've never been able to put it together, like what Dave Dorn has yet to do at his career at NC State. Not to bash on him, because like I said, he has a lot of 9-win seasons. Well, he has a lot of seasons that lead to bowl games. So it's not like 1 year it's Because it's not like Oklahoma State, where like 1 year they're competing for the conference championship, and then the next year they go 5-7 and they don't make a bowl. It's every year the margin of where NC State is at is, somewhere in the 6 to 9 range. So there is a level of consistency, but within that consistency, there's a lot of inconsistencies, which has led to why they haven't been a 10-win season or a 10-win team ever under his tenure. I think that's interesting, and we'll dive into the defense here in a little bit. But that's another thing that I think is interesting is as weird as it is, that he's a defensive coach, and that's the area that's struggled this year.
Yeah,
and I think that perfectly emulates NC State as a program. It's odd, man.
They're consistently inconsistent. That's the kind of the thing. You know that they're going to have the same record from 1 year to the next in a lot of instances, but one team overachieved and one under. And we've kind of said this about Dave Dorn. The years that nobody expects anything of his team, they perform well. And the years that you expect their team to be good, they underachieve. And that's been a very frustrating aspect of this team. And as you kind of look at their schedule, Trev, and you look at this NC State team, and you start to say, you had to win. You had to win some of those games. You needed to. You got a nice. And here's the thing they've lost their last 5 games against ranked teams. Their last win over a ranked team was beating Drake May at the end of the 2022 season. But they've got a win over a ranked team now. Virginia wasn't ranked when they beat them, but they are now. It's like, how do you beat Virginia and then 2 weeks later get whooped by Duke? And if memory serves me correctly, Trev, and I believe it was, that Duke NC State game was not even, in my opinion, as close as what the final score showed. If I believe that NC State, maybe I'm incorrect on that. They were actually I am incorrect on that. They were up 20-7, and then fell behind 38-26, and then scored a touchdown in the fourth inning to make it a 5-point game, and then Duke put it on at the end. So I was incorrect about that. For some reason, I thought that they were down big, but they were up big. So this makes it even worse. So it's frustrating watching them play and saying this team should be so much better than they are, and then go on the road and at home lose to I said earlier it's on the road. It was at home they lost to a Virginia Tech team that just fired their coach. Like, how does that happen? Like, you just can't allow things like that to happen. And that's what's so frustrating watching this NC State team, because you're like, they should be better than that. The East Carolina game is a perfect example. They were whooping ECU in the first half. And just came out of second half flat, couldn't do anything, and allowed them back in that game. And you're just like, because I think you and I were texting in the beginning of that game and like, dude, NC State, this offense is as good as we thought it was going to be. CJ was rolling and he's throwing the ball all over the field and spreading it around to different receivers, and Hollywood's making plays, and the defense looks improved. And then all of a sudden ECU starts moving the ball on them and making plays, and you're just like, dude, how do you let this team back in? And then they couldn't answer. And it's like same thing against Duke. You look through it, and they get a big lead. Duke comes back and wins, and NC State can't answer. They can't make the stops needed. Same thing against Virginia Tech. And so, you take a lead in the third quarter, and then Virginia Tech gets a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. You go and get a score, and you can't make the stops, and you need to make the stops. They take a 1-point lead with 6.5 minutes left. You had plenty of chances to still go win the game, and you couldn't get it done. And that's what I think is frustrating about these Dave Dorn teams is they're just never as good as they should be. And I mean, how does a team in the ACC that's got 4 high-level NFL draft picks on the defensive line, has a quarterback who was drafted in the NFL, Ryan Finley, had one of the most explosive running backs in the country that year? How does a team like that go into Notre Dame Stadium and give up over 300 yards rushing? How does a team like that lose 4 games? That's the thing, Trevor. And they were 7-1, 6-1 when they played Notre Dame, and then they lose to Clemson by a touchdown. And then 2 weeks later, you're thinking, okay, yeah, they lost to South Carolina. Yeah, they lost to Notre Dame. But don't worry, they're going to beat Wake Forest, who at the time was like, let me see what was Wake's record at that time. They were 6-4, and then you go lose on the road to them, and it's just like it's frustrating. It really is frustrating to say they should have years where they are better. Like, could you imagine if Dave Clawson had the talent the last 10 years that Dave Doran had? How many games he would have won? How many ACC title games he would have played in? Like that's the thing that's frustrating when you look at his team. But it's also, as an opponent, it's the thing that concerns you because that's what makes them dangerous. Because there's always that one game that they put it all together and they can hurt you.
I think the rough news for NC State is you look at their schedule and they don't really have – I hesitate to call any game a gimme game in college, but they don't really have one of those types of games until the final game of the regular season. You know, they're on the road in South Bend against Notre Dame. They have a bye. Then, yes, I understand Pittsburgh has kind of been disappointing this season, but they're on the road against Pitt. They get Georgia Tech at home. They're undefeated right now. Then you have another bye week. Then you're on the road against Miami, arguably the best team in the ACC. Then you're at home against Florida State, one of the top teams in the ACC. And then you're at home against North Carolina to finish up the season. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see how they finish the season. But I agree with you, man. NC State's just been a frustrating team to follow and one that is extremely difficult to game plan for because you just don't know what you're going to get.
That's what makes that Virginia Tech game so frustrating because they should be 5-1 right now. Let's say they lose to Notre Dame. You know, then you've got Pitt, Georgia Tech at home, Miami on the road, Florida State at home, North Carolina at home. Worst case scenario, you go 2-3 in those games, and you're 7-5. But now you're 4-2. You lose to Notre Dame, and you lose 2 of those 3 games. Let's say they lose at Pitt, lose at Miami, beat Florida State at home, or lose to Florida State at home. Now you're 6-6. You lose to Notre Dame, and now you need to beat you need to beat Pitt on the road. You need to beat Georgia Tech at home, and then you need to beat like one of Miami or Florida State just to be 7-5 at that point in time. And so that's what you look at and say that's why you can't have those missed opportunities like playing a bad Virginia Tech team at home. And their season. But the other thing, too, that concerns me about this matchup, Trev, is that makes them dangerous because now their backs are against the wall coming into this game. And what version of this NC State team is going to show up and play? Don't know.
Let's talk some NC State offense, Brian. And when you look at this unit, they are led by offensive coordinator Kurt Roper. I believe this is his first season running the offense. I think.
Let me see here real quick. I thought it was 2. You're probably right, Trev. Let me look at that real quick. Yeah, this is his first year. Robert and I was still there last year. So, yep, you're correct.
Yeah, and honestly, he's off to a good start for a first-year offensive coordinator. Now, he was given some pretty impressive tools on offense to work with.
It's his first year as the coordinator. He was there 2 years as the quarterback's coach.
Gotcha.
So I thought he was on staff, but he wasn't the OC last year.
That makes sense. He has a very good – he's definitely familiar with the talent that he has on this roster, which I think makes sense as to why C.J. Bailey has developed well and into the player that he is right now. But you start talking about this offense, and it's Kurt Roper's first season as the play caller. As Brian mentioned, that he's been with the program 2 years prior as their quarterback coach.
He was their quarterback's coach for 2 years, and then he was 3 years before that their running backs coach, and then he was also their quarterback's coach in 2019.
Gotcha. So Kurt Roper, moral of the story, Kurt Roper knows his way around NC State.
Yeah, he knows how to get around Raleigh. There's no doubt about that.
Sounds like a good hire for Dave Doran for his next offensive coordinator. Somebody that's been around that offensive side of the ball for quite some time. But first season as offensive coordinator, this offense has big picture. This is a really, really good offense, and they're putting points up on the board. I know some of their overall big picture stats don't blow some people away. Honestly, seeing where they ranked, I thought was honestly a little interesting because I thought they'd be higher. Now, for example, they're 45th in the country in points per game. I thought that would have been a little higher because of what their offensive output has been. And they're 45th in the country coming off of a 56-point performance.
Right.
So I thought that was a little interesting diving into them. But, you look
What is interesting, Trev, when you look at NC State, though, they're 23rd in scoring in games against Power 5 teams.
Mm.
So we're still at that point in the season where there are still a lot of teams that have only played 1 or 2 Power 5 games, and so their stats are a little inflated. And I think that's kind of partly why NC State's played 4 Power 5 games already, Power 4 games already. And I think that kind of factors in a little bit too. And then the team that's their non-Power 5 team that beat them, or that they beat, East Carolina, beat them in a bowl game the year before. So they've played a pretty good schedule. East Carolina's 3-2, and their only losses are to NC State and BYU. They just beat Army 2 weekends ago, their last game, 28-6. They also blew out Coastal Carolina 38-0 on the road. So they have played a challenging schedule, and I think that factors into why their overall numbers aren't kind of like Notre Dame's in certain areas. It's kind of why their overall numbers maybe aren't as high as they would be if they played another Campbell type of team, like a lot of other teams have played multiple games like that. So I think that factors in a little bit as well to that kind of conversation.
You and I were talking before the show started, and really we started talking this weekend about NC State's offense. And, one of the things that I've noticed about them, big picture, before we dive into strengths and weaknesses, is they're just, to me, when I look at them, they're a big feast or famine offense. They absolutely feast on big plays. They rank 25th, or they rank 13th in the country in pass plays at 20 yards or longer. They have 25, and they rank 20th in the country in runs of 10 yards or longer. I guess that's what a lot of teams categorize as explosive plays. Pass plays of 20 yards or more, run plays of 10 yards or more. And NC State has that by a lot. I mean, they have 59 explosive plays on the season. But it's what happens in between those. When they're not taking out 20-yard chunks through the air, when they're not taking out 10-yard chunks in the run game, they're getting 1, 2, -1. And so the overall lack of consistency, going back to big picture with this program that we talked about, you see a little bit of that on offense, but they have a very talented unit that's able to help overcome some of those things. It's also one of the reasons why they're 4-2. It's one of the reasons why they beat Virginia. So it's one of the reasons why they had 9 explosive plays in the first half against Campbell. Yes, I know it's Campbell, but like we always say, they did to an inferior opponent what a team is supposed to do to an inferior opponent. So this offense is very, I don't want to call them hit or miss, but it's just very much, big plays. It's 2 yards, 3 yards, 54 yards, 1 yard, loss of 2, gain of 40. That's kind of how they've been operating so far this season. And I think some of the numbers reflect that. They rank 122nd in the country in tackles for loss allowed. But then, like I said, they also rank 26th in the country of 30-yard completions. So it's very much shot downfield, then you lose a couple yards, and then big run downfield, and then you lose a couple yards. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is, Trev. And to your point, like as we're looking at the numbers, NC State right now in college football, and this number's not on there, but this backs up your point. They're 11th in college football this season and with plays of 20 yards or more. They're 6th in college football this year in plays of 30 yards or more. They're tied for 5th this season in plays of 40 yards or more. They have 11 plays this season of 40 yards or more. They've had 5 plays this season of 50 yards or more. So, but then you counter that, 11th in most plays of 20 yards or more. But then you look at the number right there, 3 spots below rushing yards. They are 122nd out of 136 teams in most tackles allowed per game. So the total big plays is somewhat skewed by the fact they've played 6 games so far, where a lot of teams have only played 5. They haven't had a bye week yet. But that one game is not going to be that big of a difference. It's not so maybe they only have 9 in 5 games, which is still pretty good. But the number of tackles for loss allowed and they're only 55th in sacks allowed per game shows you that that leads to what you're talking about with all the minuses. It's 40-yard run, then -2, 3, and then sack. And those are the things that really hurt this team. And then, of course, you go down and look at turnovers. They rank 75th in the country in turnovers lost. Those are the things that are really hurting this football team. Because if they can be more consistent and more efficient, this is a team that has a shot to go out there and be really effective and really impactful. And they've got to avoid those kind of plays. And if you're Notre Dame, and we'll talk more about that particular matchup, you got to take advantage of that. If you're NC State, you've got to limit the negatives. When this team limits the negatives, and I mean negatives as in negative plays, legitimate like tackles for loss and sacks, but it also can mean quarterback missing an open receiver, a drop, a turnover. If you can avoid, like, you're never going to completely avoid. If you can lessen that percentage by a third, that makes you a much more dangerous football team. If you just eliminate those by a third, you're 5-1 right now, if not 6-0. And maybe they don't beat Duke because of how bad their defense played, but you feel like they're in a pretty good position to be at least 5-1 and feeling pretty good about themselves coming into this matchup against Notre Dame. And that's what's frustrating about NC State, but that's also what makes them dangerous, because when they do play cleaner football, they're hard to stop. They're very hard to stop.
Well, let's dive into some of the strengths then on offense, Brian, because this is a unit that has really good talent on the perimeter, really at their skilled positions. It starts with quarterback CJ Bailey. He is somebody that in the preseason you were extremely, extremely high on. And so far this season, that's come to fruition. He's completing over 74% of his passes. He's thrown for over 1,600 yards, 13 passing touchdowns, 4 picks. He's also added 3 rushing touchdowns. CJ Bailey is who you thought he was going to be. So, Brian, walk me through it. What have you seen from him this season that's kind of confirmed a lot of what you've talked about in the preseason?
He's still a work in progress, but you're seeing the talent and you're seeing him progress. CJ's a true sophomore, and so some people forget that. He was a true freshman last year when he was thrust into the game, or thrust into action because of the injury to Grayson McCall. And you could see him making the freshman mistakes, and he'd have those kind of up and down games. He'd have one game where he just looks brilliant. For example, against Syracuse, he goes 17 of 24, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cal the next week, 25 of 36 for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Stanford, he goes 18 of 20 against Stanford, 234 yards, 3 touchdowns and no picks. Next week against Duke, 16 of 39, 184 yards, a touchdown, a pick. Next week against Georgia Tech, he goes 17 of 30, 147 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 picks. He goes from 3 games in a row of 13.7 yards per attempt, 8.5 yards per attempt, 11.7 yards per attempt to 4.7 and 4.9. So then what does he do in the next 2 games against North Carolina and East Carolina? He completes over 70% of his passes, averages about 236 yards, throws 5 touchdowns and only 2 picks. And you could just see that inconsistency. This season, he's gotten rid of a lot of the inconsistency from a missing open targets, which is why he's been his lowest completion percentage so far this season is 69.6. And it's not like they're dinking and dunking. And he's only averaged under 8.7 yards per attempt in 2 of the 3 games, or 2 of the 6 games. That was against Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. So you're seeing a kid that's got all the tools to be a big-time quarterback, and he's showing those things more consistently. The things that he's got to improve upon is, like a lot of young guys, and we've seen this a little bit from CJ Carr as well, he will lock in on a receiver from time to time. He won't always look as super comfortable as he needs to be going through his progressions. And so that's going to be a part of it, but he's not making the turnover-worthy throws as much as he did the season before. And so those are things I look at. But like Trev, he'll throw the ball down the field. You look at Pro Football Focus, he's got 13 completions already on only 23 attempts on throws beyond 40 yards past or 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. He's 13 of 23, 4 touchdowns, no picks. He's also completed 32 passes from 10 to 19. So he's a kid that's not completing over 70% of his passes because he's throwing a bunch of short passes. He's thrown 70 balls 10 yards past the line of scrimmage so far this season, and he's completing over 60% of those throws. That's outstanding. We were praising CJ Carr for similar numbers a week ago. And so he's a talented kid, big arm, good athlete. Marcus Freeman made a really good comment yesterday that I really appreciated from him. And because, like, I remember the previous head coach would frustrate me because he would say things about their team, and he's just clearly reading from a sheet. He has no concept of who those players were. But Coach Freeman's talking about C.J. Bailey, and the comment that he made was he's not really a dual threat quarterback. He's a passing quarterback who also happens to be athletic and can hurt you with his legs. But this isn't like you're defending a guy that is an integral part of their run game. He's not. He's a passer and a scrambler, and that makes him dangerous. And so he's a really talented quarterback, and he's really fun to watch. And when he's cooking, he's a heck of a player. And you talk about the 4 picks. That's obviously a little high. 3 of those came in the Duke game. So he's been clean turnover, or at least interception wise, in 4 of the 6 games this season.
When you go and you talk about C.J. Bailey and the good season that he's off to, you also have to have good weapons to throw to as well. It also helps to have 13 passing touchdowns on the season when you're not throwing to a bunch of scrubs.
Yep.
And C.J. Bailey has a lot of good talent at his disposal.
Oh, he does. Oh, man. This might be – well, I don't even think it might be. I'm just going to flat out say it. This is without a doubt, in my opinion, the best receiving core they've played since the A&M game. And I don't know that it's overly debatable. We can have one if you want. It'd be fun to have a nice little Tuesday debate. It's gray outside. It's been rainy and ugly all day here in South Bend. So, I'm a little cranky, but up for a good debate if you want to have that debate, Trev. But knowing you, we talk a lot, so I kind of already know where you feel. I know you don't disagree with me on that one.
No.
This is a very talented receiving core that's even deeper than I thought it was going to be, Trev, because – you expect Noah Rogers to be an impactful player. He has been. He's averaging 15.7 yards a carry or a catch this season. You expected Wesley Grimes to be a part of what they're doing this season. He's had a good year. He's got 14 catches. He's got 17.4 yards per catch. You look at Keenan Jackson and Terrell Anderson. They had 14 and 12 catches last year. That's it for the whole season. They played 13 and 12, both played 13 games. They averaged 11.3 and 10.3 yards per catch. I knew they were going to be, players and rotation guys, but they've been really good players this year so far. Terrell Anderson's actually their leading receiver from a yard standpoint. He's got 388 yards on 21 catches. He's averaging 18.5 yards per catch. Notice the high numbers. Noah Rogers is the lowest at 15.7. And then Keenan Jackson's also doing some things as well, Trev. He's more their shifty after the catch guy. He's got 17 catches for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, oh, by the way, they've got this tight end named Justin Jolly, who's probably the best tight end Notre Dame's going to face this year. He's certainly in the top 3. And loads of weapons for that football team, Trev. Loads of weapons. And, they, obviously they got to keep everybody healthy. I know Wesley Grimes, for example, missed the Duke game. And I don't think that it was a coincidence that the game that Wesley Grimes missed, he turned the ball over a bunch because – Noah Rogers and Terrell Anderson are their most talented guys. Wesley Grimes is that veteran kind of, when I'm in trouble, I go to him type of player, along with Justin Jolly. This is a very talented group. Oh, and then, by the way, Hollywood Smothers, the running back, has 21 catches out of the backfield this year. So he'll check it down to him, no problem, and try to get Hollywood in space. And as I know you're going to point out here in a second, Trevor, he's a guy that can do stuff when he's got the ball in his hands as both a runner and pass catcher. So this is a talented room. And the other thing too about it, Trev, it's a long, tall receiving core as well. I think they're small. I think Keenan Jackson is 6'1", I think. And he's their smallest guy. He's their shortest guy. Everybody else is 6'2" or 6'3". So this isn't like a bunch of shifty small guys. These are tall, long guys that CJ has no problem just throwing a back shoulder to down the field as well. So they're going to have their hands full with the skill talent that NC State brings to the table in this game. There's no question about it, Trev.
One of the things that's going to help them out is if they rely on the run game a little bit more. Mm-hmm. We mentioned Hollywood Smothers. That is a good running back, man. He's averaging 6.9 yards a carry. And to anybody thinking that that's because he has 20 carries on the season and ripped off, a couple of 50-yarders, it's not. He is 63 yards shy, or 63 carries shy of where Jeremiah Love was at to end a 16-game season. Now, yes, it's different team, Jeremiah was in more of a load share with Jadarian Price, and Hollywood Smothers is by far their premier running back.
Mm-hmm.
The next closest running back on their roster has 39 carries on the season. That's Jaden Scott. But Hollywood Smothers is a good running back. 100 carries, 693 yards through 6 games, 5 rushing touchdowns. He has 32 missed tackles forced on the season.
Yep.
32. To put that into perspective, Jeremiah Love has 22.
Yep.
Hollywood Smothers is a good running back. He is.
He's right now, Trev, to your point, he's number 6 in college football in yards per game. He's second in total yards, but he's played one more game than a lot of people. He's 6th in college football this year in yards per game. So, and he only, I mean, he had a big week last week. He went for 123 yards on 4 carries. If you take the Campbell game out, he's 7th in college football in yards per game against FBS only opponents. He's 7th in college football at 114 yards per game and 5.9 yards per carry. So he's like you said, he's a good football player, and he plays with some swagger. He plays like a kid whose name is Hollywood should play. He plays with some swagger. So you can't just say, stop the pass, stop the pass, stop the pass. If anything, I think you nailed it. I don't think Kurt Roper does enough to stay balanced. And I think that sometimes can get them in a little bit of a rut.
One of the things that impressed this offense the most, and yes, we've talked a lot about their skilled talent, but I remember in the preseason, Brian, you mentioned that the key to this offense was going to be the performance of their offensive line, because you didn't have many questions around their skilled talent. CJ Bailey, Noah Rogers, Hollywood Smothers, Justin Jolly. But you said that the success that they were going to have on offense was going to be very determinant of their offensive line, and this has actually been a unit that surprised you so far this season, that they've played relatively well.
Yeah, they have. They're steady. I don't know. Like, there's no, like, they had the kid, Ekwonu kid, a couple years ago who was a first-round NFL draft pick. I don't see anybody on the offensive line like that. But they're pretty good sized. They're bigger guys. They have, they've got some size to them, and they've been a little bit more consistent this year in pass pro than I thought they would be. Trev, that was a concern that I had for NC State, was how are they going to be protecting the quarterback, because they weren't great at it last year, and they've been pretty steady so far this season. So, I think this is an NC State football team that doesn't really have like, they're not in a situation where they've got bad talent that they've got to overcome up front. I don't think that's not really their issue for me. It's they've got good talent, not great talent. They don't always necessarily play together, but they're also, I mean, we talked about, they got some new guys in there too, but you look at their starters left to right, they're 6'4", 308. 6'3", 318, 6'1", 304, 6'5", 325, and then 6'5", 322. And Teague Anderson's the only guy so far in 6 games that has given up double digits in pressures. But, so, like, they can be beat, but you got to work to beat them. You're not just going to overwhelm them from a lack of talent. That's the area that you have to exploit. You have to win this matchup, because unlike the skill players, here, they're just kind of steady. They do their job, coached relatively well, but they don't have the talent they have on the perimeter with Noah Rogers and Justin Jolly and Terrell Anderson and Keenan Jackson and Wesley Grimes and guys like that. That's the difference for me. And so this is a matchup for Notre Dame not to exploit, but this is also a unit for NC State. When you look at their efforts for the future, this is an area where this line has to keep playing good football. And honestly, they need to get a little bit better. I want to see them be a little bit more physical at the point of attack. That's one thing that I would say is missing at times, is they don't play as physical as they need to sometimes. That's an area where I think they can and should get better. But when they are going and they're playing hard, as Virginia found out in week 2, they can roll over you and just score at will.
Brian, real quick before we transition over to defense, let's talk through some of the things that the offense, some of the weaknesses, some of the flaws that they do have. And one of them we've kind of talked about throughout the offensive segment, but it has been that lack of consistency as a unit. Yeah. We've talked about, chunk play, loss of yards, chunk play, loss of yards. You got to find the happy medium. You have to find somewhere in between.
Yeah, that's going to be the key for them, is just, and I think a lot of that just comes from experience, Trevor. I really do. they're a pretty young football team.
Yeah.
Hollywood's, CJ Bailey's a true sophomore. I think Hollywood Smothers is a redshirt sophomore. Noah Rogers is a redshirt sophomore. Like they're a pretty young football team. Wesley Grimes is a veteran, but Keenan Jackson's a younger football player. I think Terrell Anderson and Keenan Jackson are both true sophomores. I believe I'm looking this up now. Yes, they're both true sophomores. So they're still a young team. And if you're an NC State fan, this bodes really well if you can keep everybody and not have them jump in the portal. This bodes really well for the future because you could have a scenario where everybody but Wesley Grimes and Justin Jolly comes back next season. And Justin Jolly's a really good football player, but he's not the only tight end they have that's making plays this season. So they've got talent, but it's not like this is a senior-laden team that they're hoping this is the year you got to win or everybody's graduating. Now, the portal can always shake things up, but if you can keep guys here, this is just the beginning of what this offense is going to be for the next few years with CJ Bailey and Hollywood Smothers and Noah Rogers and Terrell Anderson. And I mean, I think Hollywood and Noah Rogers are the only quarterback, running back, receivers that could even go pro if they wanted to go pro. The rest of them aren't even at draft eligible. So I think that's something that factors into it when you talk about the inconsistency. Jaden Scott, redshirt freshman. He's their number 2 back who's a good football player also. So, Trev, I think that's a big part of why I think you've seen some of the inconsistency from them. Their center to left tackle are veterans, but their 2 right guard and right tackle are redshirt sophomores. There's a lot of youth on this offensive football team. I think they're going to eventually start working out some of these inconsistencies. And when they do, they're going to be really dangerous. Because if you look at it in their starting lineup, they've got 1, 2. Actually, Justin Jolly's a junior, so he could come back also next year. If he does, this offense is going to be ridiculous. 2 linemen. See, 1, 2, 3 receivers, a running back, their quarterback. They have 7 starters on this team that have sophomore eligibility. You want to know why they're an inconsistent football team? That's it right there. That's it. It's kind of like Notre Dame last year. Isn't that kind of the beef we had with Notre Dame last year? Yes, they had a veteran quarterback, but your starting running back's a true sophomore. Your best receiver was a true sophomore. You had a true freshman at left tackle. You had 2 redshirt sophomores in the starting lineup to start the season, a redshirt freshman in the starting lineup to start the season. And then you're wondering why your offensive football team is kind of up and down and inconsistent. Well, those guys got more and more consistency, and a couple of veterans got thrown into the lineup that should have been there to begin, but you get my point. But as they got more and more experience, that offense got more and more consistently effective. And I think we're going to see that at some point in time for NC State. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you just got to hope that it doesn't happen this weekend. But I think when you talk about that inconsistency, Trev, I think that's it right there. They're just young. And if you stick with it and keep coaching them up, the light's going to go on for this team. And when that does, this is going to be a really dynamic offense. Like really dynamic. And if you're an NC State booster, start raising money now, start investing however you need to do, because you are going to need to make sure you keep these kids on your football team this offseason and not having them jump in the portal. Because if you can keep this core group together, NC State's going to be a force on offense. I don't know if their defense is going to be worth a darn, but at least on offense, they're going to be able to score a lot of points these next couple of years, Trev. But that's where it comes from, is me. I just think they're young.
Yep, agreed. And unfortunately, I was just about to say, man, I mean, unfortunately, in this day and age of college football, having the option to return is not just talking about NFL draft eligibility now. It is also, the transfer portal is also a major, major factor in that. So I agree. Brian, let's talk a little NC State defense. Now, this has been the side of the ball, and this is starting to become a common theme with a lot of Notre Dame opponents this season. But common theme has been the offenses that Notre Dame has faced have been pretty electric, and the defenses have kind of been the kryptonite of these teams. You know, we had that conversation with Purdue. We had that conversation with Arkansas. We had that conversation with Boise State. And who we are a couple weeks later having that same conversation about NC State. But the numbers don't lie, man. This NC State defense is really struggling this season. And when you look at what they've done so far this year, kind of reflects what we're talking about. I mean, this is a unit that can't get off the field on third down. They rank 113th in the country on third down. They're not great at forcing turnovers.
I was getting ready to joke and say, well, they can't get off the field on third down, but at least they're not good at forcing turnovers. I mean, it ain't good.
No, they don't do a great job of creating negative plays as far as sacks go. Not bad tackles for a loss. But again, it's one of those where it's like you have 36 through 6 games. Brian, to your point, most teams have played 5. So sometimes those stat numbers can look a little weird. And then with sacks, they rank 107th in the country with 9. So this has been a defense that struggled to create a whole lot of negatives. They don't really prevent teams from moving the ball. Opposing offenses have averaged 5.6 yards per play on them. That's 84th in the country. So this has definitely been the side of the ball that has struggled for the Wolfpack.
It is, and I wonder if what's been going on with Coach Elliott has had a role in this, Trev, and obviously within the last couple weeks, that's been a storyline. There is Coach Elliott, DJ Elliott, lost his daughter to a lung bowel cancer, and so first and foremost, football aside, that's definitely something that we'll be praying for him and his family, because there's a lot more important things in football, and family is obviously one of those things. And couldn't imagine going through that. And I don't know how, as a coach, you are able to be locked in and focused all the time when that's going on, and knowing that she was losing that battle. So I believe he's back with the team now. Was he back for the Campbell game, or did he also miss that?
No, I don't think he was there for the Campbell game.
So this will be his first game back, I believe. I just, as a human, I mean, you pray for him, but his unit also has been banged up all year, and they've had guys, even guys that are playing, that aren't 100%. They've had guys missing games, guys got hurt in the preseason. They've had guys get hurt during the season. And so I think that's factored in as well to why this defense is just really underachieved. And I don't know that it was supposed to be that good to begin with, but when you factor in all those different things, it's somewhat understandable why they're struggling so much on defense. And the thing is, Trev, when you look at their numbers, those numbers benefit from the fact that they only gave up 10 points and 188 yards and 2.9 yards per play against Campbell. And so it's actually a bit worse when you take that Campbell game out. When you look at it as like just against FBS teams, it's not great. They're 83rd in scoring against just FBS teams. They are 92nd in total defense at 412.4 yards per game against FBS only opponents. Yards per play this year, they're 99th in yards per play at 6.2. against FBS opponents. So you see how much that Campbell game kind of impacted their overall production. Rushing yards didn't change. They're 57th in rushing yards this season. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Against they're still 57th against FBS only teams in rushing yards. So, but they're 107th in yards per rush at 4.9 against FBS only teams. And so let's just, for good measure, look at the pass defense here. So they're 99th in pass defense right now, right? Let's see what they are against FBS only teams. They are 114th at 267.6 yards per game this year against FBS only opponents. They are 63rd in yards per attempt this season against FBS only opponents. So you get the point, Trev, when they're playing FBS teams, 70th in quarterback rating. On the season against FBS teams, they are actually that one hasn't changed. So the number's lower, or higher, but they rank the same. It's not a good situation, Trev. Their defense is just not. It's been bad. It's been really bad. 107th in sacks per game, right? Is that what we looked at? 107th in sacks per game against FBS only teams, or 101st. That's the only stat category they went up. Went from 107th to 101st.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not good. It's not good. It's definitely not good.
So, Brian, let's dive into some of the reasoning behind these numbers. And when you start to evaluate this NC State defense, what have you seen so far that kind of sheds some light on what these numbers are? What have you seen?
Well, they're not as talented on defense as they are on offense. Their front seven actually has decent talent. They're not talented on the back end, and they've been really beat up. And they're just overall, Trev, they're a very undisciplined football team. They just make. I mean, did you like in Virginia Tech had this long touchdown run against NC State, and you go back and watch it. The guy got hit, squared up, hit 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, bounces off of it, runs for a long touchdown. Like they're a terrible tackling football team right now, and I think that's a big part of kind of want to know why they struggle. I think that's a big part of it. They're a very undisciplined football team, and this is a thing where you can't really put this on what's going on with their D coordinator, because they were a pretty bad tackling team last year. Trev, you and I talked about this when we were. So what'd you say? PFS, you told me this stat before. It was 53 missed tackles in 6 games. 54 missed tackles in 6 games. But the thing about it is, when we were doing our all opponent teams, we were talking about Sean Brown, their starting linebacker, who missed the Campbell game. But I said, look, this guy's really athletic, and this guy makes a ton of plays, and he's a good player and all this kind of stuff. But the thing we said is they don't tackle well. He doesn't tackle well. And so that's something that you look at and say, man, this team's got to be better. They're on pace for 117 missed tackles this year, Trevor, in 13 games, which is actually a 5 missed tackle improvement over last year. That number's, if they don't fix some things, that number's going to get worse, because they're where they are, and they've only really played one great offense so far this year, and that's Virginia. I mean, like Campbell, Virginia Tech, East Carolina, Wake Forest, and Duke are not exactly like a who's who of big-time offensive football teams. They have yet to play Haynes King and Jamal Haynes and Malik Rutherford and Isaiah Canyon. They've yet to play Miami and Malachi Toney. They've yet to play Florida State and have to defend Thomas Castellanos and Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson. They've yet to play Notre Dame and the best backfield in the country at generating forced tackles. I mean, so PFF had Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price down as having forced 12 missed tackles on Saturday from Boise State. 12. And so you're looking at this NC State team and you're like, you want to be better on defense, tackle. Like that's going to be a big part of what they're doing this year, because you're facing a Notre Dame team, whether it's Jadarian Price or Jeremiah Love. Jordan Faison's been hard to bring down with just one guy this season. He's been very good after the catch this year. Look at so in our film breakdown last night that Vince and I did, that we put up last night, we showed the final drive, or the second touchdown drive of the first half, which we just felt was like kind of the big play of the game. And twice on there, Malachi Fields is making plays after the catch. Jeremiah Love's making guys miss. But the first big play of that drive is a simple 6-yard hitch route to Malachi Fields. Makes one guy miss, spins out of another, and then drags 4 defenders for 22 yards. And Boise's actually a decent tackling team. They're not great, but they're not as bad as NC State. And Notre Dame made Boise State look kind of like not a very good offense when it came to doing things in space. And we talked about this, Trev. The things that hurt Notre Dame against Boise State was not Boise State related. It was Notre Dame related. In 5 games, Notre Dame's running backs, according to Pro Football Focus, have combined to force 36 missed tackles this season. Like that's a pretty impressive number. I'm gonna see if Jordan Faison has forced 10 missed tackles this season. That backs up what I just said. The receivers this year, Trev, have forced 24 missed tackles. And by the way, the Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price forced missed tackle number, that's run game only. They've got another 5 in the pass game. As a team this year, in 5 games, Notre Dame has forced 60 missed tackles in 5 games. And NC State in 6 games has had 54 missed tackles. So you want to know why they're struggling. There's a lot of 2-yard gains that turn into 15-yard gains. There's a lot of -2s that turn into +6s. If they just clean that up, they're competent enough for their defense to make enough stops for them to win a lot of football games, including the one against Notre Dame. So I think that's going to be the big key for me is just tackle better and just be more disciplined. Be more disciplined with your coverages. Be more disciplined with your pursuit angles. Be more disciplined with your gap angles. Some of the runs, like I think Virginia twice, I think both of the – one might have been third and short, but I thought they were both fourth and short. And instead of not only converting the first down, they ended up turning into long touchdown runs. Do you remember that? Were they both fourth downs, or was it just one of them was a fourth down? I think it was. I think they were both fourth downs, but it's been a month. But like that shouldn't happen. Yeah, okay, they move the chains, get a first down, but it shouldn't turn into a 60-yard run. And I'm actually going to look that up now, Trev, because that's how I am, man. That's going to bother me that I can't remember if they were both fourth downs or not. But like those type of things just can't happen. Now, fortunately for their offense, they were able to, do enough to win. Yeah, so their first touchdown of the game was a 4th and 1 at the 39-yard line, and the guy breaks tackles and ends up going for a 39-yard touchdown. Like that can't happen. Let me go to their next touchdown here, Trev. Let me find another one here. I thought they had another one. Give me a second. Here we go. This is it. It was a 3rd and 1. So it was 4th and 1 and a 3rd and 1. Jamari Taylor breaks tackles and goes for a 66-yard touchdown. So on a 4th and 1 and a 3rd and 1, you gave up over 100 yards rushing on 2 carries and 2 touchdowns. Can't happen. It's a lack of discipline and then poor tackling. And those are the things that are killing this defense right now. Much more so than, they have bad players. It's not that at all. They have good athletes on defense. They just don't play disciplined football.
Yeah, their lack of discipline doesn't help. I'm the one thing that I'll say about this defense that I do like, I think their front seven is pretty decent. I think they have some good players there. I don't think that they have like a top-end player. I don't think they have a Boubacar Traore. I don't know if they have a Drake Bowen. I don't know if they have a Kingston. I don't know if they have a Bryce Young, just using Notre Dame as a comparison. But they have good quality athletes. Sebastian Harsh, he leads the team in pressures, tackles for a loss, and sacks. They have 2 linebackers. One of them, I think his name is Cian Sloan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's kind of their –
As good as what I got.
Yeah. I was typing it out, and I was like, I could see some world where it's, like Sean. I could see some world where it's Cian or Cyan. But either way, point being, he's kind of the utility knife of their defense. He's like 6'4". He's 250 pounds. He kind of plays that like 3-4 edge rusher role. But he also has an interception on the season. He's also second on the team in run stops. So he's kind of their do-everything guy. So he's just this team has good athletes in the front seven, which makes it even a little bit more interesting that they haven't been better stopping the run. They're 93rd in the country in yards per rush, 88th in the country in rushing touchdowns allowed. But I do like some of the athletes that they have. But when you're as undisciplined of a defense as what NC State is, that's when some of the lack of talent really starts to be put on display. I think that's a lot because when you're out of position, they don't have a Leonard Moore in their secondary to make up for being a step or 2 behind. When they're undisciplined with tackles, they don't have a Kingston Viliamasa who might not be in the best spot to make a tackle, but is able to get a shoelace tackle to kind of save a big play. That's what they lack. They lack the top-end talent in the front seven while they are still talented, but I would make the argument their secondary is in rough shape.
Yeah.
It's kind of flat out just not that good.
Yeah.
And I don't really know
where they lack talent.
Yeah.
And they're young and they're undisciplined. Apparently, Trevor, it's Kiun. Cian is pronounced Kiun. I just went to his pronunciation page on his board. He has a brother named Teague. So it's like, okay.
It's a good thing he doesn't have my middle name, or that would be a heck of a name to start pronouncing. Kiun Lee Hyun Sloan. That would be rough.
Yes. There you go.
That would be rough.
There you go.
Now I know.
What's crazy about their secondary, though, Trevor, is when they're healthy, their starting lineup is basically a senior, a graduate player, a redshirt freshman, and a redshirt junior. And Ronnie Royal, their redshirt freshman, has probably been their best DB this season. So that's not good. That's not good. Yeah.
No, that overall, that's really the side of the ball that lacks that top end talent. It kind of feeds into one of the reasons. I mean, look, right now FanDuel has Notre Dame going into halftime with a 2-touchdown lead. Yeah, that's the first half spread. I can't wait for them to come out with player props in this game because I'm going to be very interested to see where they're at. But right now, FanDuel doesn't have those out.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah. But, Trev, I want to point out this other stat. Sean Brown, their linebacker, who's really really athletic. He's given up 178 yards this year after contact. Ronnie Royal this year, who's actually otherwise a pretty good player in a lot of other areas, but he's given up 95 yards after contact. Caden Fordham has given up 78 yards after contact. Or that's actually after the catch. Brody Barnhart, who is banged up, may not play this weekend. I haven't seen the update on that yet, but he's given up 77 yards after the catch. Like those things, Trev, you've just got to get better at. You've got to get better. And then 34 of their 54 missed tackles have been against the run. So it's not just the pass game where they struggle in that regard. It's the run game as well.
I think that's just the weirdest thing about this defense because you look at their personnel and they look like they're geared to stop the run because you look at what their secondary gives up and it's not good. And it's not even secondary, just coverage in general. I mean, their middle linebacker, Caden Fordham, I think he's been targeted like 26 times this season, giving up 19 receptions, 134 receiving yards, and a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
But then he also leads the team in run stops with 29. But then you look at the numbers, and what the numbers tell us is this team also isn't great at stopping the run from an efficiency standpoint. And so that when you look at total rushing yards per game at 131.8, but a defense ranks 93rd in the country in yards per rush allowed, that just tells me that teams just don't run it against them as much because they have that high-powered offense. So there's just a lot of different things, man. That's what's so interesting about this defense. But at the end of the day, like we've said the last couple of weeks, this is going to be the side of the ball that dictates if they're going to be in this game against Notre Dame. And I know
being able to get those two edge rushers going is going to be something that I think NC State's going to find ways to do. Mm-hmm. I think they know the only way to really keep Notre Dame in check is to create negatives. They have been very good at that so far, but it's one of the things they've actually been somewhat decent at. Like they don't have a lot of sacks, but the two ends have combined for over 30 pressures this year.
Yep.
And I think about 10 or 11 let me look that up. I think it's like 10 sacks plus hits on the quarterback. It's 4, 5, 6, 11. So Sebastian Harsh and Keun Sloan have combined for 5 sacks and 6 hits according to PFF and 31 total pressures this season. So they only got 24 as a team, and almost half of them are those two guys. That's going to be the key for them is you've got to get more disruptions from your front.
Yeah.
They need Brandon Cleveland to be a force too. He was on my preseason all-opponent team. He's been well, and that's the other thing too, Travis. Like their D-line actually has played well this year, in my opinion. But the problem is they play a lot of 3 down fronts, and so if your D-line's playing well, but your other 8 are not disciplined, then you're gonna have some problems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been their issue. If they got to be more sound. That's going to be a big part of that for NC State, not just against Notre Dame, but just moving forward. Because look, you don't need them to turn into the 85 Bears for this team to win a bunch of games and pull off some big upsets. You just need to make 2-3 extra stops a game. That's it. Than what you're making right now. And in some games, 1 or 2 compared to what you're doing right now. And if they can do that, just don't give up that one long touchdown run to Virginia Tech, and you're 5-1 right now. That's it. One play. And that one play is indicative of, look, their offense had their one bad game of the year, but their defense couldn't make enough stops to overcome it and win the game. And that's what cost them.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show, but don't go anywhere. We are going to wrap up today's show with a mailbag. So make sure you get those mailbag questions in. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. We're going live again. Vince and I are going to be going live Thursday for the next installment of the Spread Option. And then I know Bill Bender and Bill Troshi are also doing some stuff on that channel as well. So
they had a really interesting conversation about James Franklin today.
Okay.
So they went live at 9:30 this morning, and they talked a little bit about James Franklin for a while. So they had a very interesting conversation about James Franklin. So you're going to want to check that out. Definitely going to want to check that out. And they're going to go live again on Thursday. They go live at 9:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so you're going to want to pay attention to those guys. But that's going to be that was an interesting conversation. Very interesting conversation that they had today.
Definitely going to have to check that out. Also, make sure that you have that notification bell hit. And whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.